Well, we've talked about some men, myths, and legends, and it's truly an honor to do this next interview. We've got Roger Huston, the voice, on the line. Roger, you there?
I'm here in Grove City, Ohio.
There he is.
Yeah.
What's your current, I guess, is it a tagline? Is it a hashtag? You've got this new saying they have.
Well, you mean my new title with the Ohio?
No, there's a saying on social media. It's 2 words put together.
Oh, that goes way back to 1976. That's not nothing new. Be there!
Get down on your feet, you better get up now. It's Falcon Sinister, opening up now by 15 years, 17, 19, Falcon Sinister and Tom Holler.
What was the greatest race you ever called at the Little Brown Jug? Was it Falcon Sealster in that invitational? Was it, Wiggle It, Jiggle It? Let's just nail it right here. What was your best call in the Little Brown Jug?
Well, let's not say it's the best call, because that's the person that's listening determines that. The greatest race that I've ever called, as far as I'm concerned, is Wiggle It, Jiggle It, and Lost for Words in the Little Brown Jug. Wiggle It, Jiggle It was a fan favorite. Lost for Words was a Buckeye favorite, trained by Brian Brown, and they got hooked up in an epic battle at Delaware in 2015. And Wiggle It was having a little trouble getting around the turn, so Montrell Tig thought he would race better if he was parked. I don't think he planned to park him 7/8 of the mile.
Well, you've been announcing now. How many years did you total from day one? How many years did you total in total? Now you're kind of semi-retired. How many years have you announced?
I started in 1960.
Wow.
So 61 years.
And then how many years were you at the Meadows?
Roughly 45. I'd have to count on my fingers, but I started in 76 and left last year.
So is there a Guinness Book of World Records? Do we have to submit something to get you in the history books?
I tried to get in the Guinness World Record category, and they do not have a category for race announcers. And they listed the category as commentator, so to speak, the English word for announcer.
Now, you're very analytical when it comes to numbers. We know every single day you write every single intricate thing down. How many total races have you called in your lifetime?
I'm going to announce 2 programs upcoming at Dayton Raceway, Hollywood Dayton, and it will, after the 2 days of announcing, I will have reached 181,002 races.
Wow. So let's talk about, real quick, your current position so people know what's going on before you delve into your history and knowledge of the sport. What are you doing right now, I guess, with the OHHA? You've kind of done what John Campbell has done in the industry and remained in the industry?
Well, I don't think I'm a John Campbell, but for announcers, I'm happy to say that the Ohio Harness Horsemen Association basically talked me into leaving the Meadows after being there for 45 years and take a position with their horsemen's group. And I didn't know what the title would be or anything like that when I said yes. But then when they sent out the press release, they called me the brand ambassador.
Well, so you're a jack of all trades, but people want to really know about you as a person. I guess, where were you born and raised and introduced to the sport in the beginning?
Introduced into the sport, I wanted to buy a motorcycle when I was about 16 years old, and my parents didn't think that was a good idea, so they talked me into getting a 15-year-old brood mare by the name of Emily Martin. And we bred her 2 straight years, had 2 foals, and the gentleman that I had bought the horse from, Mike Moran and Xenia Paint Company, He is an announcer and also had the paint company. And he sold me this mare, and I bred it to his stallion.
The rest is history, I guess.
He kept track of every cent that I spent for 3 years.
Well, we got this shot here of you in the stands. How often do you actually sit in the stands? We got you here with this little dog. Obviously, you're an animal lover, but how often are you sitting in the stands?
I got to finish that other story. Mike Moran wrote me a check for $8,000 when I graduated from high school, and that paid my way through college.
Oh, wow.
So that was my first introduction. Now, how long have I been sitting in the stands? 61 years.
Where'd you go to university then?
I went to Wilmington College.
And did you have formal training, I guess, in communications? Did you get just a regular degree?
Well,
I mean...
No, that's two separate stories. In high school, the speech teacher was Olive Huston, my distant cousin, and I wouldn't take speech from her because we didn't get along.
Wow.
So when I went to college, I took one semester of public speaking from a professor by the name of Hugh Highland, and I learned more in that 6-week period with Hugh Highland, how to change your inflection and things like that, and grab an audience and everything that has to do with public speaking.
Well,
and that's all I ever had.
You know, you have a very powerful voice. Your voice is obviously, a legendary, I guess, icon in the industry. But what is it about you, behind that microphone that people really don't know about? Are you really that shy of a person?
I am so shy, it is pitiful. I cannot walk up to a person and introduce myself because I'm bashful. But once I know somebody, they'll never again believe that I'm shy. Or if they hear me announcing a horse race or on TV or something like that.
We're going to get into some of your relationships a little bit later. So people listening, you better listen on, because we're going to start talking about some individuals he's got some amazing relationships with. But again, let's go back to that dog.
What's your definition of relations?
We've got some pictures. That's all I'm going to say. So, again, we have this shot of you in the stands, with this dog. Obviously, you're an animal lover, but what's this shot here of this horse? What exactly are you doing? Is that Big John?
That is Big Bad John. It was a couple years after he won the Little Brown Jug. They brought him back so the fans could see him. And when I was an amateur driver, and a very successful amateur driver, I had a nervous feeling. I'd start yawning and things like that before a race. And one thing to keep me from being nervous, I would massage the gums of the horse that I was driving. Actually stick my hand into the horse's mouth and massage the upper gum. One day, when I was at Delaware and was massaging the gums of Big Bad John, and he was a stallion, you got to understand.
Wow.
I was massaging his gums, and somebody watching it says, "Aren't you afraid that he'll take those rings off your hand?"
Well, that was the next thing I was going to.
Eventually.
That was the next thing I was going to bring up. Now we've got the shot here of your rings, and you always have that gold jewelry, the bracelets, and what have you. Where are these rings from? Are these just from awards you've gotten over the years, and are you always wearing them 24/7?
No, I don't wear them to go to bed. It's probably the first thing I put on in the morning, the last thing I take off at night. But I had a wedding ring at one time only, and a lady by the name of Polly Kimball in New Jersey would call the Meadows and listen to her horse race by way of phone. And she sent me a horse head with a diamond for the eye. And my wife at that time said, "If you keep that ring, we're getting a divorce." Well, we got a divorce the next year, but that's another story.
Let's talk about, obviously, your book. You've recently published a book. You went on a semi-world tour promoting yourself and what have you. What are some of the things that I guess you talk about in the book? Like we're discussing today, a lot of your history. Like what can people find in that book, and where can people find that book?
Well, we're in about the third or fourth printing, believe it or not. And I do have some left. I don't know if we'll have another printing because it was almost 2 years ago now. But my son-in-law said, why don't you write a book? And I'd never thought of it. And Vicki Howard, who now lives in Florida, was a trainer at the Meadows when I first met her. And she's an author, so I contacted her, and she wrote the book for me and told me what chapters to make and what was important to me and my life story. And it took us about 2 months to put it all together, and took her another month. And the hardest thing was the pictures. It's got, I think, 80 pictures in the book.
Wow.
It put it all together, and everywhere I went, I'd sell books, whether it be at a county fair or out at a racetrack that I'd been invited to announce, and got a chance to meet a lot of people. And it was a big part of my life for 2 years ago.
We've got this shot here with a gentleman in an all blacks, I guess, colors. Looks a little young there. What happened, I guess, in Ireland when he went out there? You got to meet this gentleman, and then there's another woman, a trainer?
Oh, well, the gentleman is Dexter Dunn, and this is before he even thought of coming to the United States to drive. He was the guest driver at the Vincent Delaney Memorial Weekend in Portmarnock in Dublin, Ireland, and he came over there and just was on fire. He won probably 8 races in a 2-day period, much as he does wherever he goes, even here in the States. And Dexter's a fine young man, and a couple of years later, he decided to make the move to the United States, and it was a big move for him.
Yeah, his big qualm, I guess, is in the industry. I was talking with Pandy last week, talking about handicapping, and he referenced that Dexter is from Australia, and I had to clarify the history with Australia. I don't want to say this in a negative way. I might have gotten some heat last week. The convicts originally came to Australia, but the imports went to New Zealand. Did you know that he was from New Zealand when you first met him? I mean, obviously, it says NZ on the side of his colors.
Yeah, I knew he was from New Zealand, but he did a lot of racing as well in Australia. But I did not, I'd heard the name, but I'd never met him until he showed up in Ireland.
So let me just ask for your perspective, because you see horse people, or you've seen horse people every single day for so many years. Do you see a difference, I guess, in the driving style of, let's say, the McCarthy brothers from Australia and the driving style of a Dexter Dunn from New Zealand, or differences, let's say, in their bodies, maybe because of their diet, because the Australians are more meat and potatoes and the Kiwis are more of like a fish diet? I mean, do you see those types of things in the differences with the drivers internationally?
No. About the only thing I can tell the difference is maybe in their drinking habits and how they can handle their drinking.
Well, they say the Aussies love their beer and the Kiwis love their spirits. So let's talk about this woman. There's this woman here in this shot here. I don't know who she is, and it was in Ireland. Who is this?
Well, first of all, it was back in 2009 when I first met her at Wales at Tregearan, and she introduced herself to me, and she says, "Oh, Roger, I hope you announce a couple of my races today that we win. It'd be a big thrill and everything." I thought she was a Playboy bunny.
Wow.
Her name is Alexis Laidler, and in 2009, she started a string of championships. She has been the leading trainer in Ireland, Wales, Scotland, and Great Britain for 12 straight years.
So that's still going to this day.
She was a Playboy bunny.
Wow. I mean, look at that build on her. I mean, she probably is working out every day. I don't want to be in a dark alley with her. So let's talk about, I guess, your international experiences. Where have you been internationally besides Ireland, and where have you announced internationally?
Well, I've announced in Ireland for the last 6 years. I did Wales back in 2009, but my first overseas trip was to Sweden. And it was the time that the Pittsburgh Penguins were playing in the Stanley Cup and were winning. So my day was about a 23-hour day because in Sweden, the hockey game was on from 2 a.m. in the morning till 5 in the morning. And I'd watch it, sleep about an hour, and the Swedes had me up at 7 o'clock going to another racetrack to announce horse races. So it was a big experience to go to Sweden. Also announced in Finland and Norway Finland, I was a little leery because I could look out and see Russia. So that kind of scared me. But I went to Australia one time. I only called one race in Australia.
Wow.
One race.
Wow.
And it's one of the most watched races on YouTube in Australia and all over the world. At that time in my life, there were hub rails. And one of my phrases was, horses nailed to the rail. Means they're locked in and probably will never get out and win. And I picked the bad phrase for a horse that was in that race, and I used it. And he was the favorite, and he got again 6th or 7th at the rail, and they raced double file and everything, and it looked like he'd never get out. And I said, "The Messiah is nailed to the rail."
We've got a shot here of you sitting behind a horse. Is that in Ireland?
No, I got 2 shots of that. This was Delaware, Ohio, I think is the one you're talking about.
So do you jog regularly, once in a while, just messing around out there? Do they look for your advice sitting behind a horse?
No, I feel that the number of races that I've announced makes me qualified as being an expert driver. Seriously, I watch different styles and see how they move and when they move, and guys that shouldn't move make mistakes and stuff. I see them when I'm announcing a horse race. So in 1984, I decided to get in the Billings Amateur Trot, and I drove from 84 to 95. I've got a 369 UDRS, and horses won somewhere between $75,000 to $100,000 in the years that I drove, and I had a great time, and I loved it. And when I go back to Delaware, even to this day, I make it a point to jog a horse each year just to get back into the jog cart. And currently, I'm 78 years old, and I did it this past September even.
Well, let's talk about relationships, the foundation of our sport. We've got a shot here of you with a little child. And this next image, we might get a little emotional here. Sam McKee. It's a shot here of you back in the day. You want to start with Sam as far as mentoring, and I guess in memory of Sam, say a few good words?
Sam, as a youngster, started writing to me at the age of 10. I was in Florida. He was in Michigan. He'd send me a letter, and I'd answer it, and I'd get a letter back from him 2 days later. He was actually a pain in the you-know-where. But you never turn down the opportunity to deal with youngsters that have a passion. And Sam had a passion to be an announcer. So when I went to the Meadows in 76, Sam called me. He said, "I'd like to come down and spend a weekend with you." Well, I said, "Yeah, come down anytime, no problem." 2 days later, there was a knock on the door, and it was Sam.
Wow.
I think he was 14 years old. He had hitchhiked to Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And I had him announce qualifiers at the Meadows that year, and he also did the junior driving race that we had. It was a nationwide event for young drivers. He announced it, and then the next year I had him call a race at Delaware, Ohio, and he did tremendous. And one of the first fairs I had back in 1960 was Wilmington, Ohio, and I called Bobby Williams, the speed superintendent, and I said, "Bobby, have you got an announcer?" He says, "No, are you coming over?" And I said, "No, but I got an announcer for you." And he said, "Who is he?" And I says, "Well, you've never heard of him, but his name's Sam McKee. How much do I have to pay?" And I said, $50 a night. Now, this is 1977. And, well, how old is he? And I says, "Oh, he's 15. Doesn't even have a driver's license yet." And I'm not paying any 15-year-old kid $50. I said, "Bobby, you'll get so much publicity, you'll get it back promoting your fair." And Sam called those races. He did a number of other county fairs for me that I had doubleheaders and couldn't be at 2 different spots. And the rest is history for Sam. He went right up the ladder. And when he died, for the next year and a half, at least. And even sometimes to today, in the middle of a horse race, I'll think of Sam. And I think of him all the time. He was one of the greatest.
Let's talk about some of your favorite drivers. Let's get back to the Meadows. What about your relationship with Dave Palone over the years? Since he came onto the scene, obviously you were announcing him when he first came out and, retiring. He's still there. What about your relationship, I guess just with the drivers in general besides Dave over the years?
I announced his first drive. I announced his first win. I announced almost every milestone in his career when he surpassed Hervé. I announced when he passed Hans Waring for the world thing. When I left the Meadows, he was at 18,000 and something, and of those 18,000 races, I probably called at least 17,000 of those wins for Dave Palone. Very close relationship. Very close relationship.
Let's get into a candid relationship now. The infamous, the queen herself, Amy Hollar. We've got a few candid shots here and some real nice shots with Amy. What's your relationship with Amy, I guess, currently in Ohio?
What's your definition of nice?
Well, on social media, you guys are two celebrities. You're always up to something.
Of all the interviews that I've done in my entire life, the only ones that I'm scared of is Amy Hollar, because you have no idea what direction you're going to go in that interview. And I'm scared to death of what she'll say, because she has a different vocabulary than I do. And it's just a big question marks what's going to happen. But I love her, and she's great.
We have some candid shots here, actually some awards ceremony. We've got a couple women around you, and what's this shot in a stall here? Was this from like a calendar shoot or something?
Oh, those are some of the women that were competing in the ladies driving series in the Buckeye State, and they decided to do a calendar. And throughout my entire career, I'll do anything that people want me to do, and they wanted them giving a horse a bath after a workout mile.
Did they end up giving you a proper bath, or they just sat the chair down and then you just got up and moved away?
Well, no. I said, I think the picture will look better if I'm sitting there and the water's coming down on me, on my head and such.
Absolute
and so
classic.
That's how we got that.
Let's move forward to the current times and everything that's going on in the industry. Let's talk about your relations with is it Jason Selmour? I can't say it correctly every time I try to pronounce it. Selmour?
Jason Settlemoir. I first met Jason when he was about 15 or 16 years old, and our introduction as far as announcing was concerned, Terry Holton, a driver and a trainer that he grew up with, mentored him, introduced me to Jason, and I couldn't go to the State Fair of West Virginia, so I sent Jason down to West Virginia to announce when he was about 17 years old, and presiding judge at that time was Dr. Sam Howe, and Sam had a certain way that he wanted everything done, and I was older, so I did what and how Sam wanted it done, but Jason, being 17, just didn't follow along in Doc Howe's suggestions, and Doc called me after the fair and he says, "Don't you ever send that kid down here again." Well, that kid has gone on, and now, of course, he's the man in charge of the Meadowlands, and he's my Buckeye announcer at Delaware, Ohio for the last few years, and he's just great for the industry.
What about Gabe Prewitt, if I didn't say that correctly? What about this shot here? Looks a little young here as well. Looks, years ago when he was up and coming.
I was at Pompano one year and went up to the announcer's booth and called some races. I was on the show with Gabe before the races and called some races. And there is an individual that I am so impressed with. I've seen his career grow. He's a high school basketball referee. He was the head of the Kentucky Harness Horseman Association. Now he's got a big position with El Dorado and Caesars resorts and their racetracks and such. And he has just gone by leaps and bounds. But even though he's had such relationships with I think he's tied up with like 5 or 6 different tracks. He still goes back to Pompano each year, which is one of the tracks that he works for, and announces the races. He's a fine announcer. He's a fine individual, and sky's the limit for Gabe Pruitt.
Is there any closing words or anybody you want to give a shout out that's helped you out in the industry? Anybody you just want to say hello to internationally in the industry?
Well, COVID-19 has really affected me this year. Places that I've gone in past years didn't have racing, didn't get to make the trip to Ireland, but next year we're scheduled for reprints in Great Britain, where the Vincent Delaney Memorial will be held. So many friends that I've developed over the year I didn't see this year, and I hopefully that this COVID-19 will be behind us and get those relationships back together and see the people that have been a big part of my life forever. Of course, the number one person in my life as far as announcing will always be my uncle, Don Huston, who actually got me started announcing in 1960, and that's kind of a funny story as well. I went to all the races with him. I'd go to Hamilton Raceway and Lebanon Raceway, and when I should be home studying the books for high school, I was at the racetrack with him, and we went to a matinee in Wilmington, Ohio, and he paged me over the PA system, come to the infield judges stand. So I went to the infield judges stand. He says, I got to go to the bathroom. Do this post parade. I'll be back to call the race. Well, they're going in behind the gate for the race, and he didn't come back. And that's the first day I ever announced. And I did about 8 or 9 races, and thank goodness they got better with each race that I called. And it led to a glorious career. And this year, even with the Ohio Harness Horsemen Association, got the opportunity to go to many county fairs where we did harness races by way of Facebook Live, called some tracks that I had never been to before, and basically what the other announcers call, but a chance to go back to those county fairs. They've always referred to me as a county fair announcer, and I do not mind that one iota.
Well, the question is, you're a man of everything, a jack of all trades. When do you sleep, Roger? Do you sleep?
I'm better off if I don't sleep. I loved the schedule we had this summer. Up at 8 o'clock, do my normal work, leave at 10 a.m. to go to a county fair, do the broadcast and such, get home at 8 o'clock, do some more work until about 10:30, 11, sleep for a few hours, and then get up and start all over the very next day.
Well, we have a candid shot of you.
The more I work, the better I feel.
We got a candid shot of you here napping. Are you napping between the races? That's a big question everybody has.
No, I can take a power nap, if what you want to call it, and I have a lot of back problems, and I really was not taking a nap. I was just stretching my back because sitting in the grandstand, the seats are not the most comfortable in the world, so I was really stretching my back. I think I can announce races until I'm 100 years old, but the one thing that will force me into total retirement will probably be my physical condition that I paid the price for driving in harness races. Sitting in that race bike gave me a lot of back problems over there. One thing we did mention, I got to sneak it in. Good friend of mine was Tony Salvero, that raced for many announced races at Maywood. And I went to Maywood one night. We'd never met. I'd been on his radio show numerous times from the Meadows to Tony's Chicago show. And they introduced me as somebody else besides Roger Houston. They said, he's going to do some fairs in Ohio this year, and would you let him call a race at Maywood? So Tony said, yeah, fine, bring him up. I went up, did the post parade, and it was terrible. I intentionally made it a very bad post parade.
Well, let me ask you this before we get into it. Did you rock that building like Tony Salvaro used to rock that building? Did you ever hear the phrase, "Here comes charge plate"? I mean, did you rock that building? Is that what we're getting into?
That's for other people to determine. That's just the way I am. If I rocked the building, I did. I don't know.
I mean, you said the post parade was purposely done. Once you got behind that mic at Maywood, did you shake that building?
That's the rest of the story. Tony left me in the announcer's booth all by himself and went to outside the booth and closed the door. So the post parade, he's probably listened to him. Oh my God, this is terrible. I've made a mistake. And then I said, "They're off and pacing going into the first turn. It's so-and-so with the lead up on," and I hear from the back of the thing, "You son of a," and he knew who it was. But he didn't know who it was until I started calling the race.
You must have shaken that building. Well, we're running out of time, Roger. This last image, Little Brown Jug 2000 Wall of Fame honoree. Tell us about the accomplishments that you've obviously been awarded in this industry.
I believe it's 6 or 7 Hall of Fames, a number of awards. I'm proud of each one, no matter how big an award it is or how small an award it is. It's from people that think I deserve them. I thank them for it. It's meant a lot to me. The proudest thing, and I want to go back to the rings, the proudest thing of all those rings that I have is the Hall of Fame ring. You notice it's a bigger one. That's not my Hall of Fame ring. It's from a gentleman that told me, basically on his deathbed, he says, "Harness racing's been good to you. Now you be good to harness racing."
Wow.
Those are the words of Delvin Miller, and that ring is Delvin Miller's Hall of Fame ring, which he gave to me.
Wow.
And when I pass on, it's in my will, that ring goes to the Hall of Fame in the Delvin Miller display, but I wear it proudly every single day.
Well, Roger, it's been a pleasure. The old saying in the industry, it's been selfless promotion. It's been an honor. It's really been an honor. But again, this is this week's edition of the Horseman's Voice. Check in with us next week. Any final screams or yells you want to give us, Roger?
Thank you. I appreciate that opportunity, and as my phrase says, no matter what.
Give us one more.
Yeah.
Give us one more lead out when the gate opens.
They're off and pacing, going for the lead. It's Falcon Steelsters. He opens up by 10 lengths out of the gate. They hit the first quarter in 28-4.